Marcus Sterling had built a hotel empire worth hundreds of millions, but he'd lost the only thing that really mattered: his son. For 15 years, he'd wondered what happened to Alex after that terrible fight. Now, watching the hotel's best valet handle a difficult customer with grace, Marcus realized his search was over. His son had been right under his nose all along. Let me tell you about Marcus Sterling and how success can cost you everything that actually matters. At 55, Marcus was the kind of man who owned half the skyline. Sterling Hotel Group had properties in 12 countries, employed over 10,000 people, and generated more revenue in a month than most people saw in a lifetime. His flagship hotel, the Sterling Grand in Manhattan, was where presidents stayed, where billion-dollar deals got made, where the world's elite came to be seen. Marcus lived in the penthouse suite on the 32nd floor, surrounded by Italian marble, original Picassos, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. He drove cars that cost more than houses, wore suits that were hand-tailored in London, and could buy pretty much anything money could get him. But here's the thing about Marcus Sterling. He was completely, utterly alone. His wife Catherine had died of cancer 8 years ago. No siblings, no close friends, just business associates and employees who treated him with the kind of respect that money commands but love can't buy. The closest thing he had to family was his personal assistant, Elna, who'd been managing his life for the past decade. "Mr. Sterling, you have the board meeting at 10, lunch with the Japanese investors at 1, and the charity gala tonight at 8. Elena would rattle off every morning, and Marcus would nod and dive into another 18-hour workday. But it wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, Marcus Sterling had been a husband and a father. Once upon a time, his life had meaning beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. The tragedy of Marcus Sterling's life wasn't that he'd lost his wife to cancer, as devastating as that was. The real tragedy was that he'd lost his son through his own stupidity, pride, and inability to understand that some things mattered more than business. Alex Sterling had been the light of Marcus's life for the first 23 years of the kid's existence. Smart as hell, funny, kind-hearted, everything a father could want in a son. Alex had Marcus's dark hair and Catherine's bright blue eyes, and a smile that could charm the paint off a wall. Growing up, Alex had been fascinated by his father's business empire. He'd spend summers working in different departments of the hotels, learning every aspect of the operation from the ground up. Marcus had grand plans for the kid, Harvard Business School, then gradually taking over more responsibility until Alex could eventually run the whole company. But Alex had other ideas. "Dad, I don't want to run hotels," Alex had said during his senior year at NYU. "I want to help people." Marcus had laughed it off at first. "Son, we help people every day. We provide jobs, we create beautiful spaces, That's not what I mean, and you know it." Alex had that stubborn set to his jaw that he'd inherited from his mother. "I want to work for a non-profit, maybe teach, do something that actually makes a difference in the world." Marcus hadn't taken it well. In his mind, he was offering his son a billion-dollar empire, and Alex was talking about throwing it all away to make $40,000 a year working for some do-gooder organization. "You're being naive," Marcus had said. "Money gives you the power to make a real difference. Without financial resources, you're just pissing in the wind." "Everything isn't about money, Dad," says the kid who's never had to worry about where his next meal was coming from. The fights got worse over the following months. Marcus tried everything: bribes, threats, emotional manipulation. He offered Alex a corner office, a huge salary, even partial ownership of the company. But Alex wouldn't budge. The final blow-up happened on a cold February night in 2008. Alex had just graduated and was planning to move to Seattle to work for a homeless shelter. Marcus had been drinking, something he rarely did back then. And when Alex came to say goodbye, 15 years of frustration came pouring out. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," Marcus had shouted. "You're throwing away everything I've worked for, everything I built for you." "I never asked you to build it for me," Alex had shouted back. "I never wanted any of this. I want to make my own way in the world." "Fine, go ahead, but don't come crawling back to me when you realize how hard life is without Daddy's money." "I won't," Alex had said quietly. "And don't worry, I'll never take another penny from you. I'd rather starve than owe you anything." Those were the last words Marcus ever heard his son speak. Alex walked out that night and never came back. Never called, never wrote, never reached out. Marcus's private investigators had tracked him for a few years, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, but then the trail went cold. For 15 years, Marcus had wondered if his son was alive or dead, happy or miserable, successful or struggling. For 15 years, he'd regretted every word of that final fight. And for 15 years, he'd been too proud and too scared to admit that he'd been wrong about everything that mattered. The Sterling Grand Hotel prided itself on employing only the best. Every position, from executive chef to housekeeping staff, was filled by people who understood that excellence wasn't just a goal, it was the minimum acceptable standard. So when the head of valet services, Miguel Rodriguez, recommended a new hire, Marcus paid attention. "This kid is something special, Mr. Sterling," Miguel had said during their weekly operations meeting. "Alex Thompson, 25 solid references, works harder than anybody I've ever seen. Customers love him, never complains, shows up early and stays late. Real professional." Marcus had nodded absently. He trusted Miguel's judgment. The man had been running valet services for 8 years and had never steered him wrong. "Whatever you think is best. Should I put him on the day shift? He's good enough to handle the VIP clients." "Sure, fine." That should have been the end of it. Marcus had bigger things to worry about. The company was in the middle of acquiring 3 new properties in Europe, and every day brought new headaches. Hiring valets was way below his pay grade. But something made him curious about this Alex Thompson. Maybe it was the name. Alex wasn't exactly uncommon, but it reminded him of his son. Maybe it was Miguel's enthusiasm. The guy didn't get excited about much, but he couldn't stop talking about this new employee. So Marcus started paying attention. The first time he saw Alex Thompson was on a Tuesday morning in October. Marcus was coming back from a breakfast meeting with some investors, and as his driver pulled up to the hotel's front entrance, a young man in the hotel's burgundy valet uniform stepped forward to open his door. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. How was your meeting?" Marcus looked up and felt his breath catch. The valet was in his mid-20s, about 6 feet tall, with dark hair and bright blue eyes. He moved with a confidence that was somehow both respectful and self-assured, and when he smiled, Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't his son. The kid was too young, for one thing. Alex would be 38 now, not 25. And there were differences in the facial structure, the build, the voice, but there was something about him that was achingly familiar. "It was fine," Marcus managed to say. "You're new." "Yes, sir. Alex Thompson. Just started last week." Marcus studied the young man's face, looking for... what? He didn't even know. "How do you like working here?" "It's incredible, sir. This is the classiest operation I've ever seen. Miguel's been great. The other guys have been really welcoming, and the guests are mostly pretty cool." There was something in the way Alex spoke. An earnestness, a genuine enthusiasm for the work that reminded Marcus of his son at that age. His real son had always approached everything with that same kind of wholehearted commitment. "Well, welcome to the team." "Thank you, sir. I really appreciate the opportunity." Marcus walked into the hotel lobby, but he found himself thinking about the interaction for the rest of the day. There was something about Alex Thompson that intrigued him, though he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself paying more attention to the valet operations than he ever had before. Not obviously, he wasn't going to stand around the entrance like some creepy stalker, but he'd glance out his office window, check the security monitors, find excuses to walk through the lobby. Alex Thompson was, as Miguel had said, something special. Marcus watched him handle difficult customers with grace, treat elderly guests with extra care, and go out of his way to help anyone who needed it. The kid worked harder than anyone had a right to expect, and he did it all with a smile that seemed completely genuine. "The new valet is working out well," Marcus mentioned to Miguel during their next meeting. "Alex?" "Yeah, he's a rock star. Guests are always asking for him specifically. Had this oil executive from Texas last week who tried to tip the kid $500, and Alex turned it down." Marcus frowned. "He turned down a $500 tip." Said the guy needed the money more than he did. Turns out the exec had mentioned he was trying to pay for his daughter's medical treatments. Kid gave him the name of a charity that helps with stuff like that. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. That sounded exactly like something his son would have done, putting other people's needs ahead of his own financial interests. That's unusual. No kidding. Most guys would have taken the money and bought themselves something nice, but Alex isn't like most guys. Marcus started finding excuses to interact with Alex Thompson. Nothing obvious. He'd ask about the weather, comment on how busy they were, make small talk about the guests. But every conversation left him more intrigued. The kid was smart, well-educated, and articulate. He spoke 3 languages, had read books that most people had never heard of, and could hold his own in conversations about everything from politics to philosophy. He was clearly overqualified to be parking cars for a living, but he approached the job with a professionalism that impressed everyone around him. "Where are you from originally?" Marcus asked one day. "All over, really. My family moved around a lot when I was a kid." "What did your parents do?" Alex's expression clouded slightly. "My mom was a teacher. My dad, well, we don't really talk anymore." Something in the way Alex said it, the pain he was trying to hide, the sense of loss, made Marcus's chest tighten. He wanted to ask more questions, but Alex had turned away to help another guest. Marcus told himself he was reading too much into things. The kid reminded him of his son, but that didn't mean anything. People had doppelgangers, shared mannerisms, similar backgrounds. It was just coincidence. But deep down, Marcus knew it was more than that. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday afternoon in November. Marcus was in his office reviewing contracts when Elena knocked on his door. "Mr. Sterling, there's a situation downstairs you might want to know about." "What kind of situation?" "A guest is causing a scene about his car, claims one of the valets damaged it, demanding compensation. Security is handling it, but the guest is asking to speak with you personally." Marcus sighed. He hated dealing with customer complaints. That's what he paid other people to do. But sometimes the high-maintenance guests insisted on speaking with the owner directly. "I'll be right down." Marcus took the elevator to the lobby and immediately heard the commotion. A red-faced man in an expensive suit was shouting at Miguel while a small crowd of guests and employees watched uncomfortably. "This is completely unacceptable. That car is worth more than most people make in 5 years, and your incompetent employee put a scratch on the door." "Sir, I understand you're upset," Miguel was saying, "but let's review the security footage before—" "I don't need to review anything. I know what I saw." Marcus stepped forward. "I'm Marcus Sterling, the owner. What seems to be the problem?" The guest, a guy named Henderson, according to the registration system, launched into a tirade about how his Lamborghini had been damaged, how this was the worst service he'd ever experienced, how he was going to sue for everything they were worth. "Which valet was responsible?" Marcus asked. "That one." Henderson pointed across the lobby to where Alex Thompson was standing quietly, still in his uniform, but clearly off duty. Marcus looked at Alex, who met his gaze steadily. The young man's expression was calm, professional, but Marcus could see the tension around his eyes. "Alex, come over here, please." Alex walked over, his posture straight and confident despite the hostile atmosphere. "Yes, sir?" "Mr. Henderson claims you damaged his vehicle." "I understand his concern, sir, but I didn't damage anything. I've been very careful with his car every time he stayed here," Henderson snorted. "Of course you're going to deny it. Probably can't even afford to pay for the damage anyway." Marcus saw Alex's jaw tighten slightly, but his voice remained respectful. "Sir, I'd be happy to review the security footage with you. I'm confident it will show that I handled your vehicle appropriately." "Let's do that," Marcus said. "Miguel, can you pull up the footage from this afternoon?" They all gathered around Miguel's computer monitor as he queued up the security cameras. The footage clearly showed Alex carefully maneuvering Henderson's bright yellow Lamborghini into a parking spot, walking around the vehicle to check for any existing damage, and then locking it up and returning to his post. There, Marcus said. "No damage occurred while your car was in our valet's care." Henderson studied the footage, his face getting redder. "Well, the scratch is definitely there." "It was there when you arrived," Alex said quietly. I made a note of it in the logbook, actually. Would you like me to show you? Alex produced a small notebook and flipped to the correct entry. There, in neat handwriting, was a detailed description of the vehicle, including a note about a small scratch on driver's side door, approximately 6 inches above door handle. Henderson stared at the logbook entry, clearly realizing he'd been caught, but instead of apologizing, he doubled down. This is ridiculous. I'm not paying $500 a night to be treated like this. I want compensation for my time and aggravation. That's when Alex did something that made Marcus's heart stop. Mr. Henderson, Alex said, his voice calm but firm, I understand you're frustrated, but taking your anger out on the staff isn't going to solve anything. We've done everything we can to provide you with excellent service. Maybe instead of looking for someone to blame, you could try being grateful for what you have. The lobby went completely silent. Guests and employees alike stared at the valet who'd just lectured a millionaire about gratitude. Henderson's face turned purple. How dare you speak to me like that? I'll have your job for this. But Alex didn't back down. Sir, with all due respect, I've been nothing but professional with you. If you'd like to file a complaint about my service, you're welcome to do so. But I won't stand here and let you berate my colleagues for something that didn't happen. Marcus watched this exchange with a growing sense of recognition. The words, the tone, the unwavering moral compass. It was exactly how his son would have handled the situation. That's enough, Marcus said firmly. Mr. Henderson, I've reviewed the evidence and our employee did nothing wrong. In fact, he went above and beyond by documenting the existing damage to protect both you and the hotel. If you're not satisfied with our service, you're welcome to stay elsewhere. Henderson sputtered for a few more seconds, then grabbed his keys and stormed out, muttering about lawyers and bad reviews. After he left, Marcus turned to Alex. That was well handled. Thank you, sir. I hope I didn't overstep. Not at all. You stood up for what was right. That takes character. Alex smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made Marcus's chest ache with memories. My dad always taught me that how you treat people says more about you than it does about them. Marcus felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Those were almost the exact words he'd said to his son years ago, back when Alex was a teenager dealing with a bully at school. Smart man, your father. Alex's expression grew sad. Yeah, he was. I just wish... Well, anyway, I should get back to work. As Alex walked away, Marcus stood in the lobby feeling like his entire world had shifted. The way the kid had handled Henderson, the principles he'd demonstrated, even the specific words he'd used. It was too familiar to be coincidence. Marcus went back to his office and did something he hadn't done in years. He called his private investigator. I need you to look into someone for me. Alex Thompson works as a valet at my hotel. I want to know everything about him. 3 days later, Marcus got a call that changed everything. Mr. Sterling, it's Detective Brooks. I've got that information you requested about Alex Thompson. What did you find? That's just it, sir. Alex Thompson doesn't exist. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. What do you mean? I mean the identity is fake. Social Security number was issued 18 months ago. No employment history before that. No educational records. No credit history. It's a clean identity, well constructed, but definitely manufactured. Marcus sank into his desk chair. So, who is he really? That's where it gets interesting. Whoever this guy is, he's good at staying hidden. But I found a few breadcrumbs. A lease application in Portland from 2018 with the same signature. A volunteer record at a homeless shelter in Seattle that matches his description. And most interesting of all, a news article from Sacramento about a youth center director who quit suddenly 5 years ago. What was the name on the article? Alexander Sterling. Marcus felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. Send me everything you have. 20 minutes later, Marcus was staring at a computer screen filled with information about his son's life over the past 15 years. The picture that emerged was both heartbreaking and inspiring. After leaving New York, Alex had indeed gone to Seattle to work at a homeless shelter. He'd lived in a studio apartment, made barely enough money to survive, and spent his days helping people who had even less than he did. From there, he'd moved to Portland, then Sacramento, then San Francisco, always working for nonprofits, always helping others. The news article from Sacramento included a photo, a slightly blurry shot of a man distributing food to homeless veterans, but Marcus recognized the profile immediately. It was definitely his son, older and thinner than he remembered, but unmistakable. According to the article, Alexander Sterling had run a youth center that provided education and job training for at-risk teens. He'd been beloved by the kids and respected by his colleagues. But then, suddenly, he'd resigned and disappeared. Marcus kept digging. More articles, more photos, more evidence that his son had spent the past 15 years living exactly the kind of life he'd said he wanted, helping people, making a difference, living according to his principles. But why had he left Sacramento so suddenly? And why was he now working under a false identity? Marcus was about to find out. That evening, Marcus waited in the hotel lobby until Alex's shift ended. When the young man emerged from the employee locker room in street clothes, Marcus approached him. "Alex, could I speak with you for a moment, in private?" Something in Marcus's tone must have alerted Alex that this wasn't a routine conversation. His expression became guarded. "Of course, Mr. Sterling." Marcus led him to his private office, closing the door behind them. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the successful hotel owner and the valet who worked for him, two strangers who shared everything and nothing at all. "Your real name is Alexander Sterling," Marcus said quietly. Alex went very still. All the color drained from his face, and for a second, Marcus thought he might bolt. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Marcus pulled up the Sacramento news article on his computer and turned the screen toward Alex. "That's you, isn't it? Alexander Sterling, the youth center director who disappeared 5 years ago." Alex stared at the screen, his hands clenched into fists. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with pain and resignation. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for weeks. I confirmed it 3 days ago." Alex laughed bitterly. "Of all the hotels in all the world, I had to get a job at yours. Why are you here, son?" The word son hung in the air between them like a bridge. Neither of them was sure they were brave enough to cross. Alex closed his eyes. "Don't call me that. You gave up the right to call me that 15 years ago." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he pressed on. "Why are you working under a false identity? What happened in Sacramento?" Alex was quiet for a long time, clearly wrestling with whether to tell the truth. Finally, he sighed. "There was this kid at the center, Danny Morales, 16 years old, living on the streets after aging out of foster care, smart as hell but angry at the world. I'd been working with him for about a year, and he was finally starting to turn his life around." Alex paused, staring out the window at the city lights. "One night, Danny called me in a panic. Said he'd gotten mixed up with some gang members, owed them money he didn't have. They were threatening to kill him if he didn't pay up. He was scared, desperate, talking about running away or worse." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "I couldn't let that happen. This kid had so much potential, so much life ahead of him, so I gave him the money." "How much?" $50,000, everything I had saved up, plus some I borrowed against my future salary." Marcus stared at his son. "You gave a kid $50,000? I thought I was saving his life, and for a while it seemed like I had. Danny paid off the gang, stayed at the center, got his GED, even started taking community college classes." "What went wrong?" Alex's voice grew heavy with guilt. "The gang came back. Turns out they figured if Danny could come up with 50 grand once, he could do it again. When he couldn't pay, they killed him anyway." Marcus felt his heart break for his son. "Alex, that wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? The police said my involvement made things worse. That by paying the gang, I'd actually put Danny in more danger. The center's board agreed, said I'd shown poor judgment, violated policy, potentially endangered other kids." "So they fired you?" "They gave me the option to resign quietly. Said if I fought it, they'd make sure I never worked with kids again." Alex wiped his eyes. "I love that job, Dad. Those kids were my life. And I lost it all because I tried to do the right thing." Marcus understood now why his son had disappeared, why he'd taken on a false identity. The guilt and shame must have been overwhelming. Why didn't you come home? Why didn't you call me? Alex looked at him with hollow eyes. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Dad, remember how you told me I'd never amount to anything without your money? Well, turns out you were right. I never said that. Maybe not in those exact words, but the message was clear. You thought I was naive, idealistic, doomed to fail in the real world. When I lost everything in Sacramento, all I could think about was how disappointed you'd be. How you'd say, I told you so. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. Son, I was wrong about everything. I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot what really mattered. You didn't fail. You've been living according to your principles for 15 years. That's more than I can say. Alex shook his head. Look where it got me. I'm 38 years old, working as a valet under a fake name, living in a studio apartment in Queens. You were right, Dad. I should have taken your advice. No, Marcus said firmly. You were right, about everything. Money doesn't make you happy. Success doesn't matter if you lose your soul in the process. I've spent 15 years building hotels and making deals, and you know what I have to show for it? Nothing. No family, no real friends, no legacy worth leaving behind. You have a business empire. Buildings and bank accounts. None of it means anything without someone to share it with. They sat in silence for a moment, two men trying to bridge 15 years of hurt and misunderstanding. Why are you working here? Marcus finally asked. Of all the places you could have gone, why my hotel? Alex looked embarrassed. I didn't plan it. I was looking for work, saw the job posting, needed the money. It wasn't until I got here that I realized it was your place. By then, I was desperate enough that I couldn't afford to leave. And you didn't think I'd recognize you? I figured you'd either fire me immediately or pretend you didn't know who I was. I never expected you to be nice to me. Marcus laughed sadly. You're my son. I've missed you every single day for 15 years. I missed you too, Alex whispered. Even when I was angry, even when I told myself I hated you, I missed you. Marcus stood up and walked around his desk, stopping in front of his son. I'm sorry, Alex. I'm sorry for being too proud to support your dreams. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to choose between your principles and your family. And I'm sorry it took me 15 years to tell you that I was wrong and you were right. Alex looked up at him, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry too, Dad. I'm sorry for walking away, for staying away, for being too stubborn to call. Can we try again? Not as boss and employee, but as father and son. Alex hesitated for a moment, then stood up and wrapped his arms around his father. They held each other tightly, both crying now, both finally letting go of 15 years of pain and regret. I'd like that, Alex whispered. I'd like that a lot. Over the following months, Marcus and Alex began the slow process of rebuilding their relationship. It wasn't easy. 15 years of hurt and misunderstanding don't disappear overnight, but they were both committed to making it work. Alex moved out of his studio apartment in Queens and into one of the guest suites at the hotel. It was temporary, they both said, just until he figured out what he wanted to do next. But weeks turned into months, and neither of them seemed in any hurry for Alex to leave. Marcus offered to give Alex a position in the corporate offices, maybe start grooming him to eventually take over the business. But Alex wasn't interested in running hotels. I want to get back to working with kids, he said. That's what makes me happy. So Marcus did something that would have been unthinkable 15 years earlier. He listened to his son's dreams and figured out how to support them. What if we started a foundation, Marcus suggested. Use some of the hotel profits to fund programs for at-risk youth. You could run it, design it however you want. Alex's eyes lit up. You'd really do that? Son, I've spent my whole life building something to leave to you. If this is what you want, then this is what we'll build. The Sterling Foundation launched 6 months later with Alex as its executive director. They started small, funding existing youth programs, providing scholarships for kids aging out of foster care, supporting job training initiatives. But Alex had bigger plans. "I want to build a residential center," he told Marcus over dinner one night. "A place where kids like Danny can live while they get their lives together. Safe housing, education, job training, counseling, everything they need in one place." How much would something like that cost? Maybe $20 million to build, another $5 million a year to operate. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." The Alex Sterling Youth Center opened 2 years later in the Bronx. It was state-of-the-art facility that could house up to 100 kids at a time, with classrooms, vocational training workshops, a gym, a computer lab, and apartments where young people could live while they transitioned to independence. Alex threw himself into the work with the same passion he'd always had, but now he had resources behind him. He hired the best staff, partnered with local schools and businesses, and created programs that actually worked. Marcus, meanwhile, discovered that funding his son's dreams was more satisfying than any business deal he'd ever made. He started spending less time in the corporate offices and more time at the youth center, watching Alex work with kids who reminded him of his son at that age, idealistic, determined, convinced they could change the world. "You know what I realized," Marcus said to Alex one day as they watched a group of teenagers in the center's computer lab. "What's that?" "You were right about everything. Money doesn't buy happiness. Success doesn't matter if you're not making a difference. Family is the only thing that really counts." Alex smiled. "Took you long enough to figure that out, old man." Better late than never, right? 5 years after their reunion, Marcus and Alex Sterling stood together in the ballroom of the Sterling Grand, hosting the foundation's annual gala. The event raised over $2 million for youth programs, but more importantly, it gave the kids a chance to tell their stories. One by one, young people took the stage to talk about how the foundation had changed their lives. Former gang members who were now college students, kids who'd aged out of foster care and were now running their own businesses. Teenagers who'd been living on the streets and were now teaching others. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex said as he took the microphone for the final speech of the evening, "I want to introduce you to the man who made all of this possible, not just because of his financial support, but because he taught me that it's never too late to change, it's never too late to do the right thing, and it's never too late to come home." Marcus joined his son on stage, looking out at a ballroom full of people whose lives had been touched by their work. 15 years ago, I thought success meant building hotels and making money," Marcus said. "Tonight, I know that real success means building futures and making hope. I'm proud of the business empire I created, but I'm prouder of the son who showed me what really matters." They embraced on stage while the crowd gave them a standing ovation. But the applause wasn't what mattered to Marcus. What mattered was having his son back, having a purpose beyond profit, and knowing that the Sterling name would be remembered not for luxury hotels, but for the lives they'd helped rebuild. After the gala ended and the last guest had left, Marcus and Alex sat together in the hotel lobby, tired but happy. "You know what the best part of tonight was?" Alex asked. "What?" "Seeing you smile, really smile, not just that polite business smile you used to do. You look happy, Dad." Marcus thought about that. He was happy, genuinely, completely happy for the first time in years. "I am happy. And you know why?" "Why?" "Because I got my son back, and because we're building something together that actually matters." Alex nodded, understanding exactly what his father meant. They'd both lost so much time, made so many mistakes, hurt each other in ways that had seemed unforgivable. But love, real love, had found a way to bring them back together. And sometimes, that's all the success anyone really needs. Sometimes the people we've lost are closer than we think. Sometimes healing a relationship means swallowing your pride and admitting you were wrong. Sometimes the most successful thing you can do is support someone else's dreams instead of insisting they follow yours. Family isn't just about blood. It's about forgiveness, understanding, and the willingness to start over. Marcus and Alex Sterling lost 15 years, but they found something even more valuable, the chance to build something meaningful together. What do you think about their story? Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship after years of hurt? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.